Thank you, sir. So good evening and welcome to the City of Lake Forest Park City Council regular meeting for September 25th. With that, I would call the meeting to order, and I'd like to ask Deputy Mayor Fertani to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, sir.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Council Member. Appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. On a beautiful September evening. With that, I entertain a motion for adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? You guys have it. It passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate that very much. With that, we're moving on to public comments. I have a long missive I need to read here. State law RCW 4217A.555 does not allow the use of public facilities to promote or oppose ballot measures. Promoting or opposing the city's levy lid-lift ballot measure during council meeting would be use of public facility in violation of state law. This includes comments made during public comment section of our council meeting. The statute, however, does not limit your ability to support or oppose a ballot measure on your own time using your own resources. The council will not be accepting online public comments. This portion of the agenda is set aside for the public to address the council on agenda items or any other topic the council might have purview or control over. However, the mayor or council may not respond to comments from the public. If the comments are of a nature that the council does not have an influence or control over, then the mayor or presiding officer may request the speaker to suspend their comments. The council may direct staff to follow up on items brought up by the public. Comments are limited to a 3-minute time limit. Chief, thank you, sir. And I'm going to, with council's indulgence, I'm going to exercise chair's privilege for just a second about freedom of speech. There have been things that have happened recently that are troubling, and I know this body would never suppress anyone's right to freedom of speech. The record will show that in 2023, November 11th, there were horrific comments made in a public meeting here and on into the spring and on into almost June of last year. Our public discourse is dependent upon each of us as neighbors to say we can disagree with respect and civility. And it is unacceptable for any one of us to silence someone else, even if they say something that is absolutely reprehensible. And I can tell you that there are members of this body that sat through an absolutely horrific couple of experiences. And I would also say that it is really important as a community that we express our respect for different opinions, full stop. I have plenty of friends that have a variety of opinions, and I respect them deeply. It's when those people choose to not be civil, choose to use hatred and anger and violence, that we descend into a place that is undemocratic. I mean that with the great experiment that the United States is. And I hope that everyone in this community, and I have no doubt that every person that I serve with here on this dais will defend the right to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of how to live your own life, freedom how to love, freedom for a variety of anything without being censored, repressed, condemned, sued. And I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about my personal experience on this. We've been very, very fortunate in this community to be largely immune to those kinds of bad experiences from people who want to silence voices. And I fervently hope that when I talk to my daughter and her friends, as I did this afternoon, about you can express yourself, you can say anything you want, and you will be protected. That is what all of us as democratically elected officials are responsible for. Protect your rights, protect your freedom of speech, protect your right to be who you are. I'll leave it there. With that, Sarah Phillips, you're first up.
You know, when I fly back into Lake Forest Park after being someplace else, I do think it's the best place we could possibly live, and we're very lucky to live here. I did want to update you just briefly on the Climate Hub. We're opening on October 12th from 10 to 12. We put up it's a incremental work in process. So this phase one, we've gotten the bulletin boards up, we're framing it, we're getting some displays up, and we'll do a ribbon cutting. What our second phase is, as I've talked to you about it before, it's with the AGU has a program called Thriving Earth Exchange, which we applied for and we got. And what they give you is somebody who helps you work on a project, and they help you get a scientist to work with us. We got 2 scientists, both of who were what we asked for were people who could visualize data on a map. So we're looking at sort of how do you tell a story on a map about Lake Forest Park and what they've done in their environment. So we have great data on streams. We have great data on trees. We have great data on, I think we have great data on birds. We're meeting with the bird people tomorrow. And I think we have great data on wildlife. And what we want to do is be able to visualize that in a way where a casual user can come by. We're thinking it goes on a touchscreen TV, but we're going to begin with it on a computer so that we develop it on a computer and then people can link to it. But we really want it to be something people in the public play with. So they go, oh, look, my house, and there were 15 blue herons sighted over the last 10 years. So it's exciting, but I didn't want you to think that I'd forgotten about Climate Manager. So I did want to say, I've come across a lot of things that other cities are doing to provide resources for citizens. One is this one that you probably got from Kenmore, which is just, what are they, Adopt a Drain. And it's a program we have, but this is a direct outreach. The Kenmore we've done a number of things with Kenmore. Kenmore's doing solar, they're doing heat pumps. This is a green jobs program. I was traveling in the East Coast, and they had a program called Talk to an Energy Hub. Talk to a hub energy coach. So that is what the Climate Manager can do as part of what they do is direct services to citizens to begin to help them reduce emissions, preserve our environment, and build a resilient community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate your comments. We only have Sarah signed up. Is there anyone else that would like to give public comment other than our friends who are going to join us for our presentation on the library district? Okay, with that, we'll close public comment. Thank you, everyone. We'll stop at the Wizard of Oz. And with that, we're going to move on to Councilmember Saunders is going to share with us the proclamation regarding Breast Cancer Awareness Month.
Okay. Can you hear me? Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas, while considerable progress has been made in the fight against breast cancer, it remains the most commonly diagnosed cancer among women and the second leading cause of death among women in the United States. And whereas every 2 minutes, a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer, and 30% of new women's cancer diagnoses will be breast cancer. And whereas 1 out of every 8 women in the United States will be diagnosed with breast cancer during her lifetime. And whereas over the past decade, breast cancer rates in women have increased 1% annually, with the steepest increase in women under 50. And whereas in 2025, an estimated 316,950 new cases of invasive breast cancer are expected to be diagnosed in women in the U.S., and 59,080 new cases of non-invasive in situ breast cancer. And whereas men can also get breast cancer, and an estimated 2,800 men will be diagnosed with it in 2025. And whereas overall deaths have decreased by 44% since 1989, and there are more than 4 million breast cancer survivors in the United States, including those still being treated and those who have completed treatment. And whereas we display pink ribbons, wear pink clothing, and our police department wears pink patches and badges to raise awareness. We also support those in our community that are courageously fighting breast cancer and honor the lives lost to the disease. And whereas this October, we recognize breast cancer survivors, those battling the disease, their families and friends, who are a tireless source of love and encouragement, and applaud the efforts of our medical professionals and researchers working to find a cure for this deadly disease. And whereas Breast Cancer Awareness Month is an opportunity to unite all citizens in our community to prevent breast cancer deaths through increased education, early detection, prevention, and regular screening. Now, therefore, the Mayor and the Council of the City of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim the month of October 2025 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Lake Forest Park, and I commend this observance to all citizens and encourage all women and men to learn more about this disease. Signed this 25th day of September, 2025.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Yep.
It's very important in the time of declining investment in research. I'd like everybody to raise their hand who knows someone who's right now is going through breast cancer treatment. Startling, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember, very much.
Mm.
Moving on to Freedom of Read Month. Whereas the American Library Association's Banned Books Week celebrates the freedom to read as observed each year as a reminder of Americans to not take their freedom for granted. And whereas the freedom to read is essential to our democracy, and reading is amongst our greatest freedoms, and whereas privacy is essential to the exercise of that freedom, and the right to privacy is the right to open inquiry without having the subject of one's interest judged, examined, or scrutinized by others. And whereas the freedom to read is protected by our Constitution and intellectual freedom and is essential to the preservation of a free society and a creative culture. And whereas all library books and resources should be accessible for the interest, information, and enlightenment of all people of the community the library serves. And whereas no books or resource materials should be excluded or censored because of the origin, background, or views of those contributing to their creation, no matter how controversial the topic is. The topic such as culture, religion, love, war, science, and technology, to name a few. And the list is exhaustive. And whereas libraries should challenge censorship in the fulfillment of their responsibility to provide free access of all expressions of ideas and information. And whereas conformity limits the range and variety of inquiry and expression on which our democracy and culture depend. And whereas the American Library Association's Office of Intellectual Freedom has found a dramatic increase in book challenges in the last several years, with 2023 having the highest number since the ALA started collecting censorship data in 20 years ago, with 4,240 unique titles and 2,452 unique titles challenged in 2024. And whereas the most common reason for challenges are false claims of illegal obscenity for minors, inclusion of LGBTQIA plus characters or themes, and dealing with topics of race, racism, inclusivity, inequity, social justice, and I'm going to pause for a second here. Whereas most of the book challenges happen in public libraries, 55% with school libraries, at 38%, schools 5%, and higher education libraries at other institutions 2%. And whereas some individuals, groups, and public authorities work to remove or limit access to reading materials, to censor content in our schools, to label controversial views, to distribute lists of objectionable books or authors, and to purge libraries of materials reflecting the diversity of society. And whereas community members can show support and celebrate the freedom to read by visiting the American Library Association's website, where one can find the top 10 list of 2024 challenge books and statement on book censorship. Pardon me. And now, therefore, the mayor and the city council and the city of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim the month of October as Freedom to Read Month, and encourage all citizens of the city of Lake Forest Park to learn more about book censorship and support people's right to read on all perspectives without restriction. Signed this 25th day of September 2025. With that, I'd like to invite our friends to the library from the library district to say a few words if you would like to. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, am I on?
Push
Thank-
the button.
Do I have to? Okay.
Just start talking, see if it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for adopting that proclamation and for reading that. There was so much good information in there. And I think, as you pointed out in terms of free speech, it is very timely to what's happening in our nation. So thank you so much for doing that. And thank you on behalf of King County Library System and also our Library Advisory Committee here at Lake Forest Park. Do any of you want to say anything? All right. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We thank you for being here. Really appreciate it very much. Oh, I'm sorry. Apologies. I have actually a proclamation to present to you all. And I believe that there is an opportunity for a photo op here. I'd love the council, if they're willing to join us, to share this proclamation with our friends from the library district. Thank you very much, Matt, for reminding me. In my own words. Yes, we'll get this.
Yeah, it might be easier to say. Front means impact is possible. Super tall.
Yeah. One, two, three. Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate all of it. Thank you, everyone. Second here. Honestly, colleagues, I never thought we'd be where we are right now when it comes to this topic. Moving on. I'd entertain a motion for adoption of the consent calendar.
So moved. Second.
Are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, it's adopted by unanimous consent. Thank you, everyone. Ordinances and resolution for introduction and referral. Director Hoffman, resolution 25-2030, adoption of the American with Disability Act ADA grievance procedures. Sir, welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Mark Hoffman, Community Development Director. This next item is a proposed resolution to formally adopt a grievance procedure and a form. And so it represents a process that we would already do, but many of us are new here. And as we discover opportunities to flesh out or add more detail or professionalize or meet standards, we take them. So this one came through the city clerk. This resolution would formally adopt the process under Title II of the American with Disabilities Act. And then if adopted, staff would work on distribution, making it more prominent. So tonight's just an introduction. We can field any questions that you may have. We would like to return at a future meeting and recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hoffman. Colleagues, did you have a chance to review? And I think this is an important step for us to formalize this process. Yes, Deputy Mayor Furtani.
Yeah, thank you, Director Hoffman. Yeah, the cover sheet was very helpful. I'm wondering, how often is the grievance procedure actually used currently? Like roughly how many times a year?
I've been here almost 2 years. This is the first time it's risen to a discussion. So, and a grievance is not active right now. In prior instances, the ADA question comes up once or twice a year, but it could happen at any time. This was brought to our attention because of a farmer's market held the same day that the King County elections ballot box was live.
Oh, sure.
So making it more prominent, I would say the biggest issue we're trying to address here is often members of the community don't know who to contact.
Mhm.
We know that we're doing the process and we're diligent and would pursue it right away and remedy it. We don't need this formal process to do that. But those outside of this building need this formal process to be assured somebody is listening and how it's achieved.
Well, I appreciate you being proactive about this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Colleagues, other questions? Vice Chair Goldman.
Yes, thanks for bringing this to us. Is it accurate to say that this form makes the process a bit more formalized and a bit more public facing, but it doesn't fundamentally change the process?
I would agree with that. Yes. The formal is the 60 days to file, 15 days, 15 days, and then the rights of appeal, 15 days, 15 days. So it's much more formal. Where I would say the constraint is finding the right person without this, finding the right person, making sure they're aware, not on vacation, they get it, they work it into their workload. Our intent is to get to it right away. And often the variable is, when are you available to come in and talk to us? And then the the timeline depends on the actual issue. So the way this resolution and Exhibit A is written, each of us play a role. If it's building related, structure related, sidewalks and so forth, the designee of the city administrator can address it. Often that's the building official, not always. If it's a sidewalk, a voting box, it can get to the right person through this formalized process. And it helps us in here. Who do we get this issue to? So it's just more plain day.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from colleagues? Well, thank you, Director Hoffman, for bringing this to us, workflows and making sure that things don't fall through the crack.
And just to be honest, I think the police for handling the situation on that given day and the city clerk for putting this together. I'm just here to speak to it. Thank you.
Thanks for being proactive, you all. Appreciate that very much. Okay, council action discussion. Wow, we're just moving right along here. Any other business? Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
I think we're moving too fast, so I actually have 3 items of other business. Hopefully none of them are too long. So item number 1, we received an email recently from SCA about committee memberships. And there's a couple of dozen committees that we as council members or the mayor could apply to serve on for next year. I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. SCA's policy is if 2 people from the same city apply for the same position, they cancel each other out and they both get thrown out. So I think it would be worthwhile having us discuss this at our October COW because applications are due in November. So I would encourage my fellow council members and the mayor to think about if there's any committees you would want to apply to, and we can talk about that at the October COW. That's item 1. Item 2 is related. With that, there's a couple of items that are set for our October cow, and there's a couple of others that we haven't set yet. So I would like to gauge interest in holding a cow in November. The standard date would be Monday, November 24th. That happens to be the Monday before Thanksgiving, and so the 17th would also be an option. So I wanted to gauge interest and availability on either the 17th or 24th for holding a cow.
So Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. I'm likely to be out of town on the 17th, but I will be here on the 24th.
Okay, head nods for the 24th. Okay.
My 23rd.
My term's over.
Take your time.
That's right.
So,
Oh.
my time is short, so.
Oh,
And you actually, and Councilmember McCartney did want to speak.
Sure.
So potentially that could be a topic then for the October cow, then I think we could fit you in on that.
Sure. Great.
If you're interested in
Yeah.
speaking about town center.
Yeah.
So we could plan that for the October cow, and that way, in the event you're no longer in the council, you would still have had a chance to speak on it.
Great.
But in terms of November 24th, any objections?
no, but I have to just say, channeling Bart Simpson, don't have a cow, man. So, sorry.
Don't want a cow? Or-
No. I've been holding that in reserve for 15 years, so I just had to get it out tonight, Larry, apologize.
Okay, and then
Go
third
for it.
item, I would like to move that we excuse Councilmember Riddle from tonight's meeting.
It's been moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor, sorry, any discussion? All those in favor of excusing Councilmember Riddle signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, do I have to hand raise vote here, folks? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays?
Nay.
Okay, there we go.
Well, she usually does that.
Yeah, I know, exactly. So that's great. Thank you.
And that concludes my other business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldman. Any other business, council members? Council member reports. Okay,
I could keep talking.
please go for it. Yeah, because I couldn't
Go
get
ahead, Larry.
at the sound, at the,
Last Friday, we had a regional transportation meeting. There's 3 King County transportation forums. Ours is Seashore. So Seashore, East Side, and Skateboard all met downtown. The topic was the FIFA World Cup and plans that various transit agencies, Metro, Sound Transit, the airport, what their plans are to handle transit for the potentially huge number of people visiting Seattle next summer.
wow.
Notably absent from the meeting was anyone from Seattle.
Oh, goodness.
Nice.
Well, thank you for holding down the fort, Larry. I was out of town. Appreciate that. Yes, Deputy Refer Tony.
Thank you. So just, there was a RIA 8 meeting. That's the Water Resources Inventory, Area 8. That's the watershed that we're in. And in fact, there's going to be a salmon summit of many different groups in early December. I'll have more information about it as soon as they pin down a date. It's also the 25th anniversary of RIA 8, and then we're one of the first members of it. So I think it'd be great if people could attend that.
Yeah, thank you. Colleagues, other council member reports. Well, I thank you for your patience. I was down with COVID. I was actually during the work session 10 days ago. I was in my office. Not work session and council meeting. I was sitting in my office here. I just didn't want to risk exposing anyone. Fortunately, it was mild. It's going around, and I don't know whether it was picked up at picnic in the park or where it was. There was a bunch of city activities that week, a bunch of things at town center here too. So fortunately, it's been mild. I spoke with a friend who she is in her 80s. She contracted COVID the same day and she did fine. So get vaccinated if you possibly can going forward. If you haven't had COVID, I have to wait now until December apparently. A couple other things. Picnic in the Park was a huge success. Thank you to staff, Director Hoffman, Public Works, Corey particularly. She just nailed that. It was super fun. Lots of kiddos, animals. My daughter was very happy that she was able to hold the alligator on her head and it didn't pee on her this time. So as of last year, it peed on her. So there is a picture out there, and I will disavow it, of me holding the alligator on my head. So it's not me, it's AI. Yeah. The other thing was, speaking of animals, the bird, you may have heard that I rescued a heron, a giant blue heron, a while ago after a neighbor called me, and been released to the wild, and apparently it's doing fabulously. So that's one of the largest birds I've ever had to deal with. Rescued an eagle once, but the heron was actually pretty extraordinary. And Councilmember Lebo's son works at the Snohomish County Paws Center. What's the name? It's Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, and that's where I took the bird.
You know, I just think of it as pause.
Well, they have one in Linwood too. That's
Right, but
yeah.
you're right. The Snohomish one is for wildlife,
Yeah,
yeah, no to domestic animals.
that's my first time there. I've been to the Linwood one many times, but that was really a great experience. And I got a personal phone call from the CEO saying, "Thank you for bringing the bird in." Didn't know who I was. It was on my personal cell phone, so it was very sweet of them to do that. And it actually illustrates the point. We need to have a procedure that that can be broadcast to the public for helping wildlife, because most people would know what to do. I barely knew what to do. So many thanks to your son for helping with that, John. That's a great work. Very important work. Speaking of that, there was a bear at Horizon View Park 10 days ago.
Wow.
Pictures circulating. I haven't seen them. Hopefully the bear made it successfully where it's supposed to go. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The last thing I wanted to say, we are in the silly season. You know, we've got election coming up and things going on. I hope that we all could continue to be neighborly and considerate, thinking about the values and respecting different opinions. I know that you all value the rights of everyone to have their own opinion, and whoever is out there and running for election, wish everyone the best success. And the most important part about this is that it is a discussion with civility and compassion, and hopefully it brings people closer together, not pulls them in the other direction. So that's my fervent hope. And you know, I'm old, so I can wish for some things. But with that, CA's report, Mr. Hill, anything to highlight? Nothing there? Okay. Yeah, Paul. Councilmember Good.
I haven't had my dinner, so my mind wasn't there but we completed Citizen Police Academy.
Oh,
It was great.
Oh, go. Yeah,
Yes, we learned how to do DUI stuff.
yeah. Cool.
We had
Last night was the
goggles.
graduation of the community academy. Sorry, Phil. I know you want me to wrap it up. But it was 4 weeks long, and then there's a ride along portion, so 5 weeks. And we had 3 council members, Councilmember Good and Councilmember Riddle and Councilmember Fioritani joined. There was a dozen students. It went outstanding. The feedback was great, and we're excited that we did this process. And we'll continue to do this process. And I understand the city is going to do the same thing on the city side of things and how things go. So it's pretty impressive that we were able to put that together. Commander Zanilla did an outstanding job. Commander Adams did a great job. And we had people doing practicals and demos, and it was really fun. So thank you for bringing that.
Thank you, Chief. And thanks for council members who attended. That reminds me, a bunch of us, almost everybody was at the Stewardship Foundation celebration the other night at Red Sky Gallery, where they presented the city with a beautiful painting they're donating to the city of a tree. It was a great really great event. It was fun to see everybody there and absolutely fantastic to support local businesses and see everybody celebrate the artists in our community and
Gonna put it.
we have a great place down below to hang the picture. We're going to move the 5 Acre Woods photograph around the corner and hang it right there by the entrance to City Hall. So I think it'll be really fun. And by the way, my daughter got enamored with the little earrings and paper. I can't remember the style is. The artist showed my daughter. Her granddaughter actually made all these jewelry pieces, and my daughter got so excited. She went home that night and had me cut little tiny strips of paper so she could glue them together to make these earrings. So she made my better half a beautiful set of flower earrings. So maybe one of y'all get a set.
Sign me up. Yeah.
Sign you up. We'll sign you up. Yeah, well, it's a small business. We want to
There
encourage
you
it
go.
like for a spark. With that happy note, yes.
And I was kind of hoping that Director Dickinson would be here tonight, but perhaps one of y'all could answer. In the CA report, I noticed that we bought a new Silverado. Do you know if it's a hybrid?
It is not.
It is not. Oh, sorry.
Today.
Okay.
Yeah. It's yeah.
The full-size trucks, I don't believe they come in a hybrid yet for the
No, it's
heavy
a
duty.
3500.
The heavy
It's a big one.
duties that Public Works needs for their
Okay.
work. Yeah, that's not available at this point.
It's too much. It's actually too much.
And you didn't want
It's a 1
And
ton.
you didn't want to spring for the Rivian?
Next budget.
Another story.
Fair enough.
Yeah. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. Y'all.
Sure, real next time. Not for that, but.